Thursday morning, everyone, and welcome to a special edition of Perspectives. It's our post-budget review. Budget 2021 was presented yesterday by new Finance Minister, the Honorable Gregory Bowen. So this morning, our expert panel, Senator Christopher Daly, Mr. Byron Campbell, and our special guest panelist, Mr. Ambrose Phillip, we will review the budget. I am the moderator, Brenda Batiste. Good morning to everyone. It is Thursday, December the 3rd, and it is Perspectives. Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning, Brenda.
So morning, great Brenda. To be seeing you guys 2 days in a week. This could become a habit.
I don't think so.
Let's not push it.
Aye. Oh, good morning. So yesterday, while our guests will join us shortly. So yesterday, the 2021 budget was presented under the theme, Towards Vision 2035, Recovery, Transformation, and Resilience. And before we delve into the engine room, let me just dance in the lobby for a little bit.
Sure.
So in terms of the presentation, because we are used to the budgets of recent past go way back. We are so used to Dr. Keith Mitchell presenting it as Finance Minister and Prime Minister. And yesterday we had the new Finance Minister, the Honorable Gregory Bowen, presenting. So in terms of style and all of that, how did he do?
Well, I mean, if you're comparing him to Prime Minister Mitchell, I think he...
We want to do that.
Yes. But Honorable Minister Bowen did a good job, I think, in presentation and how he presented. Of course, when the debate starts and he has to answer, then you see the real matter of the debate and how he presented. But I think he did a good job, and I don't know if Minister Bowen did this before. Not Minister Bowen, Minister Bowen did this before. But all in all, I think he did a good job. He kept on target. He kept his things in place. So, Prime Minister Mitchell had a little more flair probably when he explains things, and But I think in terms of presentation style, he did well. And presenting a budget after a COVID year can never be an easy thing for anybody, whether it's this government or any government in the world. It will be a challenge, and the criticisms will come in wherever, because you can't satisfy everybody on this. And there is so much unpredictability in 2021 that putting a budget together in itself is a challenge, whether it be business or national, as this case is. So we have to keep all of those things in mind. And when the presentation is done and we see the figures, it's easy to criticize, but it's very difficult to come up with a plan to say, with so much uncertainty, to say to the general public, listen, this is what we think we can get done based on all the constraints and the factors that's coming at us. So I think generally there was a good job done, and it is never easy to sit in that chair and to put that down. So we sometimes forget that. And budgets are normally done for legal reasons, because the votes for government and to spend. But I thought yesterday there was a good attempt at creating hope as well. There's a psycho part of the budget to the general population to say this is about people. We care. We have to find a way to relieve stress where we can. So I thought there was a good hope. I know the themes, about restoring hope in our people and supporting recovery or economy. That is a good theme. And there were two others. But that part of these budgets are normally underestimated, how it can impact personally people and their lives. And I think yesterday there was a good attempt at trying to reconcile that, understanding all that we have had to deal with and will have to deal with in 2021.
You mentioned preparing a budget after COVID, but in essence, we are still going through COVID. We're in another phase.
Yeah, that's right.
Mr. Campbell, your thoughts?
Well, I was there yesterday physically. Right. There were great expectations. A number of things was new in that you had a new permanent secretary, you have a new Minister of Finance, and as Chris pointed out, a new environment in terms of the whole COVID, the pandemic, and all that's carried with it. I was particularly looking at what was coming in terms of the social programs. I was pleased that there were increases there, even in this difficult time,
That's right.
recognizing there's a lot of dislocation and displacement underemployment and unemployment within the community for 2021. So I saw that and I thought that was good. Clearly, what was highlighted there, I think, also is the fact that we'll see our loan portfolio increasing. In fact, it's a spike going to take place. We could talk about more details on this, but as you know, a budget, there's no new taxes, so the question was, I saw, how do we consolidate? How do we more or less attempt to maintain at least what we have presently? And I think there was a general good attempt to do this, you know. It's interesting as to look at the debate and what's the pro and con. You're not going to please everyone. It's not going to be ideal for all, but it's a start and it's a plan. I think also that whereas it's very clear on what the projections are in terms of expenditure and revenue, and clearly there's going to be major reductions in revenues, that at the same time there was an attempt to, in terms of the financing aspect of it, I think I look forward to more details on that, you know, but it is clearly something that's still in the work. There's a clear attempt here to maximize the grant aspect of it, you know, in the financing plan. So it'd be interesting to see how it rolls out and what the debate brings on board.
And your thoughts about the presentation style of the...
Well, yeah, in fact, I was asking the Prime Minister yesterday about to what extent he was pleased with Minister Bowen's presentation, given the Prime Minister has been the one Finance Minister for the past, 10 plus years, 15 years. I thought, as Chris pointed out, it's a different style, but clearly it was a shorter presentation, I think about an hour and 25 minutes thereabout. Prime Minister usually go over an hour and a half, sometimes close to 2 hours. So it was shorter, I think, very direct to the point, not much frills to it, focused on the main content. So I thought he did a good job relatively his first time.
All right. Yeah. So that was our good little dance in the lobby, just the soft side of things. So we're getting ready to head into the engine room. It is a special edition of Perspectives on this Thursday morning, and our special guest panelist is Mr. Ambrose J. Phillip. We take a quick break. We'll be right back.
Viking Engineering, heat, ventilation, air conditioning and refrigeration engineers and contractors since 1985. Authorized dealers of Toshiba Carrier Corporation. Suppliers of highly sustainable air conditioning equipment which saves up to 50% on electrical consumption. The choice of equipment is yours. Air conditioning services. Air conditioning system consultation, design, fabrication, installation and maintenance. Ventilation services. Indoor air quality analysis. Exhaust and fresh air system design and installation. Refrigeration services. Installation and maintenance of display refrigerators and walk-in freezers. Contact Viking Engineering, the HVAC-R experts. Often imitated, never duplicated. Call 444-4934 today.
This Christmas, we need the good vibes more than ever at LA Purcell. Shop all new selections at our home goods, appliance, and hardware stores. Brighten things up at our color center with paint to put the finishing touches on the industry's best building supplies. Last but not least, our annual yard sale is on again for 2 weeks at the LA Purcell Car Park in town and 3 weeks at our River Road store, both starting December 5th. Come and name your prize. And remember, Purcell's motto is cash if you have it or credit if you want it.
It's that special time of the year to wish upon a star with Star Malt. Drink and win cash prizes just for you and add merriment to the season.
So this Christmas, drink Star Malt and check under the red Star Malt crown and win cash to help complete all the things you need this Christmas. Every drink gives you a chance to make your wishes come true.
Blender, buy it. Ham, purchase it. Christmas shopping, spend it. $20, $50, $100, and it's a big one.
$500.
Cash, and Star Malt, of course. Prizes are redeemable from the Partygrenada Limited main office, sales office, and sales trunks. All provided while stocks last. Terms and conditions apply.
Merry Christmas from Star Malt.
Welcome back to this special edition of Perspectives on Thursday morning. And of course, as we're having the post-budget conversation, budget presented yesterday by Finance Minister, the Honorable Gregory Bowen. To now joining our panel, our special guest panelist this morning, Ambrose Phillip is a graduate of Management Studies program of the University of the West Indies. He holds a Master's of Science in Ports and Shipping Administration from the World Maritime University, Malmö, Sweden, and a certificate in Legal Education from UWI. Mr. Phillip was engaged by the Grenada Ports Authority during the period 1984 to 2015. He was the port manager during 1988 to 1990, and was the general manager until he retired in April 2015. He was also Grenada's Director of Maritime Affairs, and in that capacity was the national focal point for the International Maritime Organization, the International Oil Pollution Compensation Fund, the Caribbean MOU on Port State Control, and the Maritime and Transport Committee of the Association of Caribbean States. Mr. Phillip has also served as a director of the Public Service Cooperative Credit Union, which we now know as ARISA, one of the country's largest credit unions, for over 10 years. And he has also held directorships on the Grenada Board of Tourism, which is now the GTA, the Grenada Electricity Services Limited, GRENLEC, the National Stadium Authority. Mr. Phillip was also the chairman and Ports Authority's director on the board of Grenrail, a real estate company in which a Ports Authority held a significant interest. He has been a director of the Grenada Cooperative Bank for 6 years and its chairman from 2017 to 2019. Say all of that to introduce a most brilliant Grenadian, Mr. Ambrose J. Phillip. Good morning, Mr. Phillip.
Morning to you and morning to all.
It's a pleasure to have you here with us.
I hope it will be.
So yesterday, our new finance minister presented our 2021 budget under the theme towards Vision 2035, Recovery, Transformation, and Resilience. And in the budget overview, section 8.1, it says, consistent with the imperatives for recovery, transformation, and resilience, the 2021 estimates of expenditure provides for a total expenditure, including amortization, and you will tell the general public what amortization is, of $1,232,670,049. Recovery, transformation, resilience. Recovery, transformation, resilience. In the context of everything presented yesterday, where do you see those?
To begin with, I believe that the first place to start is the throne speech delivered by Her Excellency previously. Because what the throne speech does is to set the policy framework. That phrase you just read out there about reformation, transformation, and resilience is the theme of the budget, but the budget is set against the backdrop of the policy statement. And the throne speech is the principal policy statement of the government with respect to the coming period. And that therefore brings us to the question of what is the role of a budget. What should a budget be doing? A budget is a dual document. It is an elaboration of policy, and it is an implementation plan. It's an implementation profile. These are the two functions. I don't know if my colleagues will agree with me. These are the two principal functions of a budget. I don't know if our budget yesterday was a budget. Our budget yesterday, in fact, has been more in the line of a wish list. And in fact, it is probably no mystery as to why it is presented in December, because I believe it is going to need St. Nicholas for implementation. There are a tremendous amount of programs listed in the budget in which no detail has been given, and which in fact is going to rely on hope. Right? So that would be my initial summary of the budget. In fact, to the extent that it is a wish list, it is in fact disappointing. The truth that came out from Brother Bowen yesterday was that we are going to face difficult times. But even within the framework of the difficult times, we are seeing that the principal participants who are asked for sacrifice will be the public sector workers. I don't see any fiscal measures that are going to deal with sacrifice. There are no increase in taxes, which in fact will impact on the broad population as a whole. I see no specific support to Comrade Dialli's or Senator Dialli's friends in the private sector. So I don't know how we're going to do it. I agree it is difficult times. It is probably the only occasion in our history, or the history that I can remember, where in fact we have a deficit budget, or a budget where you are projecting a deficit at the end of it. In other words, your expenditure, whether it is recurrent or current expenditure and capital expenditure, is likely to be more than you are able to raise by way of revenue measures, whether it is taxation, the direct or indirect at the border, or whatever it is, plus the question of grants. Right. The question of performance in previous years was highlighted in the budget and is worthy of commendation. However, in the same breath, and that has become necessary, the minister has been asking the fiscal responsibility legislation to raise the bar, because some of the requirements of that legislation cannot be met in this period. Right. And in fact, you would have seen a similar thing around the world. You would have seen it with the British budget, which was delivered about 6 weeks ago. You would have seen it in the Trinidad budget delivered by Colin, but it is probably 2 months now. Right? So that is not unusual. But without the intervention of St. Nicholas, some of the wishes...
Before you go on, though, as you mentioned St. Nick and the wish list and the hopefulness and all of that, the actual realities of the pandemic, do you think it had any impact in terms of actually just, I don't want to use the word wishing, but maybe prospecting, as opposed to saying this is what will happen? Because would you agree that there is still uncertainty once COVID continues?
Yes, there is uncertainty. Yes, there is continuing uncertainty. And not only is there continuing uncertainty, there is certainty in the uncertainty.
Right.
The certainty of it is that we are not going to begin to see daylight in the tunnel until between June and September next year.
Second half.
Why? Because the great hope, the prospect of vaccines, which the US and other countries have funded and are putting so much hopes on, the question of vaccines reaching our frontline workers. And who are the frontline workers? Frontline workers are the border control people, whether at the seaport or the airport, the marinas, the protective services, the medical personnel, right? And I ain't come to old people yet. We old people down the list. Right? So even in terms of vaccine reaching, these critical groups, we will be lucky, even with the efforts of the UN and so on, towards ensuring that vaccines become available to poorer countries or less rich countries. We are certain that not one single vaccine will be on Grenadian soil before sometime during the second half of 2021.
That could be a good thing.
I will glad to be upset or rather surprised in that regard. So there is certainty in that uncertainty. And the government has to find a way of dealing with measures that will address the uncertainties, the certain uncertainties that we are going to face going forward. If you look at the budget presentation, I think it is on page 19, there are 3 imperatives in the budget there, where there are 3 points of focus. There is the question of, let me find it. I don't know if one of you could help me with it offhand, but there's a question of education, there's a question of construction, and there's a question of retail services, and there's a question of agriculture. I think it is 4 of them.
Those are the sectors.
Those are the sectors. And then one needs to look in this. The throne speech had given you the policy framework and so on. This budget itself highlights these 3 or 4 areas for the recovery process. But we need to look at the budget itself to see what has been provided or what is hoped for. And unfortunately, from my perspective, what I'm seeing there is wishful. I hope it is not just wishful thinking, but there are a number of wishes there in terms of addressing those sectors. There's an absence of specifics. If you look at the allocation of the budget, which I think comes lower down, somewhere around page 23 or lower, the allocations there, where you're seeing how much million for agriculture, for education, and so on and so on, you are not seeing specific actions programmed for these areas. And that is my disappointment with the budget. I think that this period calls for concrete actions, and there have to be definite indications of things that will happen, not what you hope for will happen. What has been one of the biggest problems with budget implementation in Grenada throughout the NNP administration? In every previous budget speech, it has been addressed by the previous Minister of Finance, the Honorable Prime Minister, and that has been the question of implementation, particularly of the Capital or Public Sector Investment Program. Implementation has plagued budget presentations or budget activity in all of the previous years. What is going to change it this year? And we have a number of actions inside of there that are calling for capital expenditure. The roadwork program is huge. So it is not just a question of adding up numbers and hoping. The Minister of Finance yesterday has proven that he's an excellent engineer. He has been able to do the maths, but I don't know if he'll be able to deliver on the ground. So it is all well and good to talk about big numbers, but how are we in fact realizing it? And that is my worry. That's my worry about the budget. We talk about what it is, something like 124 million for the education, for the agriculture, and what's the other one? There's a third broad area. But we're not seeing specifics. Even the government's flagship program, the Imani project, we are seeing an increase, I think, to $40 million there in terms of what is called a transitory, that's the right word, transitory period. But we ain't seen detail on that. Right. I don't know that Mr. Diali will be able to engage or have any transition period insistence for any one of the Imani workers if he has no market to sell his goods to. And if we continue to have shutdown or lockdowns or wherever it is, nobody ain't going to be buying paint. Because you can't paint inside of your house if you're going to be locked up inside of it. That's out of the question.
You could.
So there it is again, the uncertainty. The uncertainty plagues right through. Gentlemen?
Well, I mean, I have to agree with Mr. Phillip to some degree, and I say some degree, because I think when you look at the 6% projected GDP growth, that we have never had 6% in the last 5 or so years. We've been averaging 4%.
But no stick up in. Remember the base for that 6%. The base is practically a negative base of last year.
That's right.
Yeah.
I come
Yeah.
to that.
Yeah, yeah.
I come to that.
So
We expect to contract by 12%
Yeah.
and then grow by 6%. So you're looking at a turnaround of about 18% if you were to do the maths from that point of view. So I hear that and I see that, and I think that is one of the biggest challenges this budget in this presentation will face. The minister yesterday directed that this growth is going to come from 3 sectors as highlighted, construction being the main one. And he listed a number of projects in there that will lead the charge for construction. And Ambrose is also very correct. Implementation has not been a forte of this government, or any government for that fact, in many years past. And then there's the other aspect of the absorptive capacity. In other words, how can do we have the relevant personnel, machinery, technical people on the ground to, when we push money in these sectors in construction, that they can implement and get it done? That is what we're talking about, absorptive capacity. Can we absorb enough of this money within the various technicalities that we need to get all of these projects going? And that has been a challenge over the years. So that is clearly one of the weak areas of the budget, and how that is going to be achieved based on what was presented. No, I mean, Ambrose talked about the duality of the budget, and part of the duality is to give people a sense of hope, a sense of that you will want to create employment through various areas. We know what COVID has done with unemployment, so you have to present something as well. And as I said in the early going, it is never going to be easy for any government to do a budget in a post-COVID, or not even post, in a live COVID environment, and what the expectations will be or will not be for 2021.
Well, as Mr. Phillip said, the certainty is the uncertainty.
Right, and you have
That's a quote of the day.
You have to make sure that you present something that could say to the average man on the ground, listen, if I come in your community to do some roads or to do a bridge, you're going to get some work, I'll put some money in your pocket, and hopefully that will help with the situation and create some, or remove some of the disparity, the fear and the uncertainty among people. So that is also part of the remit of the budget. So I understand that. But the major challenge will be the implementation and the effecting of all of that. And that has to be, and Mr. Phillip is correct in that the minister didn't go into a lot of detail. I know we had a Ministry of Implementation that was set up a couple of years ago, and that was to remove bureaucracy and so on and so forth, so that you could get past the red tape and get things to happen faster. So yes, I would say, and I would agree that that is the biggest challenge to the budget and what is there in terms of what is presented. But when we talk about allocations, we have Ministry of Infrastructure at 134 million, rounding up, Education at 124, Finance at 120, Health at 95. And I mean, we haven't had time to compare this to the last budget to see if there was increases or decreases. So, but I know a lot of hoopla was made so far when you listen to the various other programs about agriculture getting, or right down on the list at number 9, getting 18.6 million. And everybody was thinking that, you know, that agriculture was supposed to be one of the areas highlighted leading up to the budget that is supposed to provide food security and probably more thing in this budget. But that is not what has been presented. What has been presented to lead this charge in this budget is primarily construction and the 2 other sectors that was mentioned. So I look at shift away, although the minister was quick to, in his presentation, say that what you're seeing for agriculture at 18.6 would be augmented by another 40 million in feeder roads and all of that. So don't just look at the 18.6.
Yeah.
So there is those challenges that is going to come to the budget. But, and the other one, of course, is debt to GDP. The spike that has been mentioned, that is going to go up to 60-something% of GDP. And part of that is because GDP would fall in 2021, obviously it's going to spike based on the debt. I mean, when you look at the figures, there's only 45 million they're projecting in debt for 2021. A lot of this is going to be grant funding coming through the NTF, through CBI, to execute some of these projects.
The debt, in that construct though, the debt to GDP ratio, what do you perceive to, what would be the threat there?
Well, I mean, really servicing of the debt and the cash flow for the debt. But if you're getting a lot of it coming from and we talk about suspending our targets for in the financial FRL, which they have done for this year because you're allowed to do that on certain circumstances or special circumstances. But the real thing is servicing of the debt and your ability. A lot of the debt holders understand that all countries face pandemics, have been facing this pandemic, and it's not business as usual.
Right.
So a lot of the debt holders, international and regional, are reasonable in that they're not pressing governments now to keep up their schedules, and so some of them have even given moratoriums to various governments as it relates to debt payment. So that helps. It's not that it's gone, it's there. And I think the servicing of debt, the amortization that you spoke about.
That's like the principal, right?
That's right, yeah. Well, and interest to some degree.
Okay.
Both.
Both
Principal and interest.
Principal and interest.
And I think when you look at the budget, 300 million is dedicated to that. Okay. So it's not that government is not planning to pay, they have to pay, but they have to generate the economic activity to give them the revenues to pay. And that is part of the challenge going forward.
Even the overall, the deterioration in the debt situation is not terrible, because a year or two ago, whether it would have been the CDB, the IMF, or whoever it is, that have been telling you that you should not exceed a target of 60% of GDP.
Yeah.
So last year or year before, I think we were at around 58.
50 something.
58%.
Yeah.
And with the measures proposed within the budget for increase for the deficit financing and for the increased debt activity, you'll be going to 69%. And that is not terrible, because there was a time when we were in fact 100 and something percent. So it is not a lost cause in that regard. And I remember when Boson was minister, him saying to the opposition, what's your problem with the debt? If you can't manage it, we can.
Before we move on to Mr. Campbell, because I specifically, Mr. Campbell is strategically placed to handle a lot of the conversation about the financing for agriculture, where he is in the rural unit and so on and so forth. I just want you to comment on this, Mr. Phillip. One of the things I remember when I went back to, or sent back to the fiscal responsibility legislation, when I heard about a waiver, and the question that popped in my mind was, you mentioned that it's needed, and Senator Diali said the same in light of the conditions, but moving forward though, the time sensitivity on the waiver, because it can't go on forever. So the time sensitivity on the waiver, you gentlemen care to comment?
Well, I mean, the waiver is going to last for 2021. They have to get back to the targets in 2022. So
if we can.
If we can. So it's certainly for 1 year.
Okay.
And that is what was presented.
So we're looking at just like a year.
Yeah.
Hopefully a year.
And Ambrose's point about the certain uncertainty of COVID and the vaccine is going to influence that. And I mean, there's a delicate balance, Brenda, that you have to play with livelihoods and lives. That is always a delicate balance, and there's no government, there's no one person that has the answer to this. You have to play it out based on how your environmental conditions change or don't change. So when we talk about opening up borders, and I've heard one commentator say, you know, you need to spend more money on protecting the borders and making sure that you have all the necessary protocols in place. Yes, that is a valid point, but you also have to understand that you must open to get back some level of activity. There's a lot of criticisms about the 100 million that we're going to spend on the airport, and whether that is a proper thing to do in this time, and in terms, and that was one of the projects mentioned in this as well. Again, we have to play that against the whole aspect of, when we expand the airport, is it an expansion for now or down the road? So in 2022, when we go back to the targets, are we saying to the international community we are up to a level where we can encourage increased traffic and all that comes with that? Because there is so much downstream activities, economic activities that are affected when we have these parts of our economic and macroeconomic society closed to a certain degree. And it is never an easy balance, you know, so it is something that we need to take cognizance of as we go forward. Well, I want to say one final thing that I didn't hear Ambrose talk about. And a major threat to this budget is the labor situation. And he mentioned it in passing about the public servants and sacrifice that has to be made there. But I think that is something I would like to discuss before we end, because I believe that is a major threat to this budget and the achievement of things in this budget
I'm
as
sure
well.
Mr. Phillip has a lot to say on that, so we can table that for later. But let's move to Mr. Campbell, because the all-important agriculture, the expectations. We had the new senator just Monday speaking about,
right.
you know, what he was looking
Brenna,
to do.
I look at it not only from an agricultural point of view, but also in terms of the social programs.
Right.
Because in terms of the present pandemic, what we experience is a high unemployment and high underemployment also. Some persons have small revenues, but certainly not sufficient to meet their essential and basic needs. One thing we observed in the budget clearly that even in a dire revenue situation, we've seen an increase in the social spending, social expenditures, such as the seed program, the bushing programs, and other programs in Imani and support for youth, and even, which is a new one, some specific support for single-headed households, and I thought it was a good approach. And we know that as much as 45% of our households are headed by single women, and they are in great difficulty. So I'm pleased to see some more resources being directed to support these families in terms of livelihood support. In the agricultural sector, I was expecting a higher level in terms of overall 1.5% of the overall budget is directed. But pointedly, and you pointed out, Chris, that I think the overall is like to be about $40 million because you have other programs such as the SIA program, the AgriCom programs that are directing significant monies. For example, I'm aware that in terms of farm roads, which is different to the feeder roads. Right. The farm roads are more, and some 36 roads have been identified, I think, in the current year coming. I know that about 14 of these roads will be rehabilitated. The average cost may be about $500,000, but the point is provide essential access to critical farming areas. And I think that's important. It's going to provide some short-term employment, but more important, direct access to farmers. The bigger issue too, of course, and it was mentioned a bit in terms of the whole, how we adapt to the climate change that's present in terms of the droughts and rainfall and flooding and so on. And what kind of preparation we make also in terms of that transition into having younger persons being attracted into the agricultural sector. So there are resources. I know part of that 40 million are directed to these activities. We learned also there are a number of major projects, private sector agricultural projects. I heard about 2 large poultry projects, and then we have the Cane Co and some others. But more, in my view, is needed because as we look around, what the pandemic told us, that there's been a disparity, so to speak, in terms of the amount of resources directed towards the tourism sector. Nothing's wrong with that, but we see the fickleness in it. We see major world events dramatically closes essentially our tourism sector. So it tells us that how, with $400 million being directed to food imports, that we have to find mechanism or do more to just produce more food for ourselves. So I agree with my colleagues here that a lot of details wasn't given. It seems that we need an implementation plan coming out of this budget that would detail specifically, with specifics, how these plans are going to be effective. Yeah. And I know from practical experience and presently the difficulty that exists in implementation. I want to say this isn't limited to Grenada. I look at the stats in some of the region and we have implementation levels of 45%, 30%, 60%. So it's below par. In other words, we need to see a strategy that will tell us and direct us is how we're going to do it different this year or in the next year.
Let's pick up on implementation.
Let me address 3 things that Byron
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah. I shudder to think that the debushing program will be expanded. Because when you drive around the country and see the bushing gangs operate, right, it is in fact a drag on productivity. It is a bad example where work is concerned for others. And the problem with that is it competes with agriculture in terms of farmers who now have to pay so much for so little. So I have fundamental problems with the debushing program. Yes, I agree that as a means of social transfer, it does put money into the hands of some people who really, really need it. But the work ethic that comes out of it is...
How can we do it better?
How could we do it better? Ask for the government to work out.
No, but you could have.
No.
I don't want him to express the view on that. No, leave that alone.
You could give a suggestion.
If I had to address that particular question, I would revisit the state-owned sector in agriculture. Because there are still a number of farms, I believe Monk Rule and one or two others that have not been totally abandoned or given away.
Yeah.
I would revisit these, probably
Grand
looking,
Brown.
and this is something I discussed with my comrades on the other side once upon a time. The question of establishing satellite farms, one satellite farm per parish, right? Where you can take the pressure off of the bushing on the road and actually put on a nutmeg that is going to last until the next hurricane or until the next 15 years.
Right.
Because when you do the debushing on the road, 6 weeks after, and if rain falling, the next day, you have to come back and cut it.
Right.
So I had difficulty with that. What was the other point you raised about there was the debushing, the expansion of the social program. I don't know if we don't need to find another way of doing that. Yes, I agree that there are a large number of single-parent households, and single-parent in this case, bear in mind that we're not talking about women only. There are single parents who are men. But how do we ensure that we gain value for money there? How do we ensure that money allocated for a program like that will reach the right people? Are we going to be doing means testing, right? Or are we, in fact, finding another way to transfer money to who some people might regard as being party favorites? That is a challenge. That is a challenge there. And I don't know about the question of an independent agency doing that. Because if you look at the trend these days, a number of these things tend to be concentrated in the parliamentary office. Right? So you don't know that there is objectivity in terms of the selection of the beneficiaries. There are some people, in fact, who are fundamentally opposed to the debushing program because they claim that it benefits one side only, one color only, and not the other color. So there are challenges. There are challenges there, particularly when we talk about using borrowed money or scarce funds to put into these areas.
But
We
the
have to
principle is
we
the
have to ensure that there is objectivity.
Yeah.
Right.
Could you
in
go to the
groups.
NGO community to have it done?
Well,
Isn't there bias there as well?
I think that the NGO community needs to be involved, but I don't know that there has been that
Collaboration.
understanding and trust.
Yeah.
Trust is the issue here between the NGO or the communities and the government per se. I don't know that there is that. But that, in fact, and you see, this is something that we...
Because in my taking, I would give that $2 million to the NGOs. They know the single parent and single men families more than any one of us. And any government agency can
Of
do it.
course. That's true.
So I will definitely lobby for them to get it.
And the blame of government, being biased or being partial should be removed.
Exactly. So I want to agree with that absolutely.
Let's go back to this question of trust.
Before going back, we need to take a break. So when we come back, we're going to continue on trust. It is a special edition of Perspectives here on this Thursday morning. We're having the post-budget conversation. Our special guest panelist this morning is Mr. Ambrose J. Phillip and our expert talk panel of Senator Christopher Deali and Mr. Byron Campbell. We take a break. We'll be right back.
There is something new to the classic Wester Hall rum look. Wester Hall Estate Rum. What's your number? Drink responsibly.
The Grenada Steel Band Association presents man on the sand. But what will all of that be without food? So we bring in pork. So it's going to be pan, pork on the sand. You get it? Sunday, December 6th from 12 noon until. Bring the family, bring everyone. Come spend the day with us, no man. Pork, roasted, stewed, jira, jugged, barbecued, wild meat, seafood, and more. There will be solid premium bars put together by our friends at Westerhall Rums and Bridens, mixing up their finest cocktails and drinks. And if you feel for wine, we got plenty of that. The nation's finest steel band orchestras and soloists will be on display. Suzuki Food Fair Band Wizards, Republic Bank Angel Harps, Comancheros, Rainbow City All-Stars, and New Dimension Steel Orchestra. Wildwood's Pocket is BBC Beach, Sunday, December 6th. Adults, $20, children, $5. Ah, boy, what a line that's gonna be. So get there early. Limited audience. All COVID-19 protocols will be strictly observed.
Hey love, it's Maya here from Shea Maya's Way, the company that brought you the famous Let That Mango Body Butter. This year, we are bringing you something very special. It is called 7 Days of Glomas. We are partnering with over 20 local businesses to make this the biggest, most diverse giveaway yet. And it's so easy to win. Just come in at the right location on the specified dates and buy a jar of Let That Mango Body Butter. And you get the chance to dip and win different prizes from skincare, hair care, cakes and pastries, jewelries and accessories, photo shoots, perfume sets, and even a Christmas ham. So come on out and celebrate with us this Christmas season.
Welcome back to Perspectives. Remember, if you have to leave us, please continue looking at following us on your devices. Of course, you catch us on the MTV Facebook platform, TNR Communications, and Partygrenada.com, and our own Perspectives page. Just before we took the break, Mr. Phillip, the word was trust.
Trust. In situations like these, whether it is post-Ivan or post-pandemic, the question of a national consensus on what we face and how we could try to get out of it is necessary. A joint consensus. And in this case, we're talking about a tripartite consensus. Government, the opposition, and what they call the social partners. We have seen this thing work beautifully in Barbados. Beautifully. And I'm not talking about from yesterday or with Mia Motley. I'm talking about from ages before. This tripartite consensus in Barbados has worked. We can't even recognize its existence here. But there has to be some dialogue. There has to be some negotiation of some kind of a minimum program. How the Americans call it? Building confidence bridges going forward. There has to be some minimum agreement in terms of that, particularly in a situation where you have more than 45% of the population voting for the next side, but the next side does not have a voice in the House. Of course, I mean, the next side has been very capable of shooting themselves in the foot. The occurrences of the last 2 weeks doesn't help them in that regard. But that does not mean that they must be ignored or put aside. And in the case of the approach going forward in dealing with this pandemic, the question of a national consensus by those who genuinely represent the other side, even though not in the House or the Houses of Parliament, is something that we need to work on.
Well,
and I would issue the call here now for the vulnerable bishops and archbishops and opposition to collaborate with government and try to find, in spite of the differences and dislikes, to find a minimum platform that could be agreed on in terms of going forward. And this
So
is
you're
not
calling
just,
for
this is
a lifting,
yes.
an elevation of,
but I won't disagree with Mr. Phillip on that one.
This is not just in terms of in addressing the 2021-2022. It is also in the context of the National Sustainable Plan, where we don't know the extent of input. Maybe Senator from his government relations knows, right? We don't know the extent of their input. Are we going to have a change of government in 2, 3, or 4 years' time and find that the 2035 plan changes because the next side didn't agree with it?
Well, that's part of my disagreement with Mr. Phillip. I think the tripartite or multipartite process in our case has worked well in the last few years. We have had consistent meetings. We have had a lot of times where we will meet, and we may agree to disagree on issues, but a lot of the stakeholders were considered and were brought into the discussion on planning the way forward and what we must do. The 2035 plan was testimony to that to some degree, and there was a lot of buy-in in the plan. And at the end of the day, the aspect of the plan, and this budget actually linked its 2021-2022 back to the medium-term plan. As a matter of fact, a great part of the budget is dedicated to harmonizing what is being done here with some of the objectives set for the 2035 plan and the goals set by the UN, the SDA goals. Right. So it is all linked to part of that, and that is the first time we're doing that, and that is an important understanding in going forward. We're not looking to just pull things out of a hat. We have already set parameters. We're now linking it to this document, and we're saying that we're putting ourselves on a path and a trajectory that says this is what we're working to for the next 5 years, 10 years, as it relates to whether it be education, fiscal reform, whatever it is. That this is going to be the plan we're working, and the budget now is going to be linked to that plan and harmonized to that. So there is an attempt in this budget to start that, and I think that is laudable, and that speaks to some of the issues that Mr. Phillip just brought up. But I would agree.
I think, though, I just want to stick in there that we just don't. The harmonization and the all of that, all those things are there in concept, as you just explained. But how we behave is another matter. Right, and we have to be real about that.
I want to get to that. And
whether it be government or whether it be those
running out of
opposing.
time, and I want to put this on the table for the panel to consider. And I am worried that in that discussion and in all of us getting to understand and speaking from the same page or harmonizing our efforts going forward, that labor, and I'm going to come back to that, labor seems to be not on the same page with us.
All right.
And that worries me, because I am one of those that believe that a lot of the intentions of this budget could be undermined. If the 4% that public workers are supposed to get from January 1, which Minister said is an average of over $13 million in recurrent expenditure that will increase, and if there is no consideration of how that is done, we hear the issue being raised by teachers or the doc pay. They're not even want to listen unless you consider the doc pay. I don't think there's a time for that kind of adversarial relationships that we're encouraging. The pandemic, none of us have a solution that is written somewhere for us to go and say, okay, let me take the book to do with the pandemic and implement that. It is a work in progress, and a lot of us shooting from the hip. We don't know if it will work or it wouldn't work.
So let's shoot here. Let's talk about, and great for raising that, Senator Diali, the threats to the budget and the current environment, so to speak. So we have COVID and
revenue,
labor.
Certainly,
so
overall.
we're on labor now. Mr. Phillip, you.
I don't know if I want to address this labor matter. I would want to agree with Senator Diali in this respect. We cannot be talking about pay increases or even considering pay increases at this point in time. We cannot even be considering the question of a deferral of pay increase. It has to be a zero position to begin with. Because it is not a case where you're going to be putting this money somewhere else and could come back and use it 3, 5, or 10 years from now. If it's in there, it's in there. Right? And in other words, it's a question of recalibration of the clock.
Right.
You're starting back from zero, not coming and telling me there's something at the back door. And it may be difficult for workers to understand that. But I think it is a question of a responsibility and maturity on the part of the leadership of the trade union movement. Right? Now that my good friend, the Honorable Senator Humphrey, is closely aligned with the government, I would want to hear him come out and tell the working movement, the labor movement, that this is the direction that it needs to go. I'm on backroom operation. Come out. If they want to say that he's betrayed them, fine.
Senator Humphrey is not a backroom man.
And I just want to add to Ambrose and say that for me, Brenda, understanding employees' plight, the focus must be in ensuring that they have a job. That must be the focus.
Since so many has lost their jobs
and so many have gotten cuts in pay, both across private sector, not in the public sector, by the way.
No.
The public sector since March have been at full pay, full benefits, everything. But in the private sector, we have taken some drastic measures. Businesses have shut down, people have lost their jobs, 50% pay cuts to keep some people going. That hasn't happened in the public sector. So the public sector workers have enjoyed a relatively stable, privileged thing in this crisis.
But here we are in December.
Must say these.
To bring it right home to this period, here we are in December, and there are people looking for bonuses too, eh?
Well, just to mention. But in fact, on this work and labor stuff, I think there are two bases going forward. One is the question of productivity. Right? Pay needs to be linked with productivity. And secondly, the question of profitability. If we cannot be talking about automatic increases or increases simply because time passed, then we must be talking about profit sharing. If there is a profit, if there is share. If there is no profit, you're not creating money out of thin air. So these are the two things, two P's going forward: productivity and profit sharing. Right? If we talk about worker participation, this is a model that came out of the 16th century.
So what we're hearing is that there must be sacrifices everywhere. And I just want to mention briefly the agricultural sector, again, back to it in terms of nutmegs.
Just before you go on, callers, the number is 440-7171. Of course, you pose your questions to our great panel of experts here, 440-7171.
What we're learning is that there's no bonus. Why? There's no profits. So the whole, and Ambrose, you're a nutmeg farmer. There's no bonus this year. You're not, and not only that, but you find the price is.
This is very interesting. Because
you find also, let me finish first.
I was in a pocket meeting last night.
Yes.
In after Pomrose of the, what do you call it?
St. David, somewhere. Yeah.
Latant. All right. There were about 15 of us in this meeting. But there is also, and I told the meeting this thing, the Nutmeg Association, Nutmeg and Cocoa, share a WhatsApp group. And you would be amazed as to the number of comments on this WhatsApp group about bonus. I find it mind-boggling because you could only talk about bonus if, A, there has been sales. I believe the Nutmeg Association may have sold 2 shipments abroad for the whole year.
The government just get their money so they could buy from farmers.
How could you talk about a bonus in the absence of sales? Then further confusion. In this budget, right, and in the media within the last 2 or 3 days, government, it was announced that government has given a grant of $1 million to the farmers.
For price support. It's very specific.
For price support. And in fact, the government was specific. This is to buy nutmeg. It is not for no bonus. Because the Nutmeg Association is buying the nutmeg and doing what with it? Putting it in storage. Once you put it in storage, the question of deterioration then arises.
And cost,
So something is wrong with us.
So this is to say that the sacrifice that we see is across the board. It's for rural persons. It has to be for public workers also. So I just want to agree with the rest of the panel that you can conceive or think about increases. That has to be on pause until.
And not pause, as I must say, it's not deferral.
It's not deferral.
I mean, I heard the minister say in his speech yesterday about deferral. I don't think it's a deferral. You can't say I'm postponing this 4% to the next year or 2 years down the road and I'll give you back. This has to be saying, no, I know the labor movement will say, whenever there is a problem, the first thing we ask in workers is to do sacrifice. That's the first place we come in. And I know that has been their chant. And yes, that is probably so to some degree, but at the end of the day, you had to talk about survivability of businesses and enterprises. It's not just about workers. Workers is part of the equation. Any business that doesn't look at workers and look at the overall cost structure is doing a disadvantage as well. So it's a whole cost structure that needs to be looked and tampered with in line with your revenue. These are two equations. As Ambrose said, if you're in our sales, how are you going to get something else?
But Mr. Phillip's point as well is well taken, because it even goes back to what we were saying about when we started at the top about implementation, because the productivity has to be linked to your performance at work. A lot of places in Grenada don't even do a performance appraisal. When they fire you or something, you hear you wasn't doing a good job. Nobody tells you anything and coaches you along the way. But regarding implementation though, and one thing in that, there's a freeze on hiring. And how does, how critical is this in terms of the capacity and the efficacy of implementation?
The freeze was qualified. If I remember the statement, to the extent that the Public Service Commission was not making certain appointments or recommendations to appointed positions. But I think that there has been a charge that government has bypassed the freeze by use of persons, A, in the Imani program, and B, use of persons in the higher technical group. So by way of contracts. So I don't know what the actual truth is, because I have not seen all the data, all the figures.
Just to add on, there's an anomaly there as well, Brenda. If you want to put freeze in the standard public sector work, whatever the positions are the thing, as Ambrose was saying, how are we implementing with capacities that we need, that is critical, and you want to freeze on certain aspects. Now, I'm not saying that these people must all be put on the permanent aspect of the public service, but you cannot freeze employment in the sense of bringing on technical people in contractual ways to implement this huge construction budget that we go forward.
So gentlemen,
that's an anomaly to me.
Gentlemen, we have the ministries and we know we have the policy, but based on our current set of circumstances, right, and how critical, we have this huge pie of the budget for infrastructure, and how critical the element of implementation is needed, right? We know how culturally we perform in terms of ministries and so on and so forth. Do we need like a national secretariat? I sound like a PRG person here. Do we need a national secretariat, a task force, whatever you may call it, of the best of us from wherever we are across the spectrum to really table this thing forward?
No. And I say no because within this budget, there is a proposal to create physical planning physical planning as a separate entity on its own.
An authority.
As an authority.
Yeah, statutory.
It's not going to work if the politicians continue to put their cotton-picking fingers in the affairs of these institutions. That's the objective reality of it. If you're going to interfere, then you have no authority. Funny enough, you heard the Ali Prezi Airport project. I am of the view that cotton-picking fingers have intervened in the airport. Right?
I didn't praise it. I mentioned it as one of the projects.
No, it sounded to me that you praise it. Because
I don't object to it.
Now that we're on the airport, I have no doubt that the airport must have had some strategic plan or whatever it is to do this. But this would have been based on what? This may have been based on the results of the previous strategic review and the previous data. There is nothing in the current dispensation, that seems to suggest that all of $160 million is necessary at this particular point in time. So I have fundamental concerns about our project going forward. Particularly where, and I ain't happen to work with it.
We shouldn't get it ready though? We shouldn't prepare? Like when you go to plant the nutmegs, right? Have you
ever seen a report of the airport authority? The last one that is available, the last one in the public domain, is the 2016 report. And in the 2016 report, you are talking of a total income of about $30 million. You know what it takes to debt service $160 million? Our Chinese friends must have given us that money with a 10-year grace period, 0 interest rate, and a payback period of 40 years. Anything under 25 years, and anything in excess of 2.5% in terms of interest on the debt servicing becomes problematic. Because you talk to all of the airlines that still remain flying, all of the airlines that remain flying around the world have been doing so with government bailouts.
A question though, when does the servicing of this loan begins?
That's what I tell you, they need a 10-year grace period, they need a 40-year repayment period, and they need an interest rate not exceeding 2.5%.
I can't speak to the specifics, but I know there's a grace period. I'm not sure how long. I know the interest is pretty low. But Ambrose is right. I mean, but at the end of the day, the only counter-argument to that is that the debt is in the name of the airport authority. They're talented financial engineers that will sit down on both sides to work out how this can be paid and the affordability of it as well.
Don't give me that. This is
hold on, let me finish.
No. Listen, this is one of the comments that FROC has made in its previous reports.
Yes.
That in truth and in fact, you cannot separate the central government or the treasury debt from the debt of those that it has had to guarantee, right? And it is responsible for. Whether it is the Stadium Authority, whether it is the Food and Nutrition Council.
The government is ultimately responsible.
We call them contingent liabilities. It only becomes a pressure on the government when you default.
When the authority cannot deal with it.
That's right.
Well, my take on this very briefly, though, is that, look, we're in a pandemic right now. Clearly, as Ambrose pointed, all airlines, the whole airline industry is in problems, and airports, given the pandemic. But here's a situation where, from the justification given, that we need to upgrade this facility, given the long time that it was constructed in terms of upgrade, environmental and other issues has to be addressed. Could it be a good time to do this upgrade at this time in terms of when you have a low? Let me finish.
Even in this budget, government has marked a 700,000 savings.
Yes.
From diplomats and government officials flying around the place.
75% in reduction.
If 10% of that was going to the airport, the ticket is going to get $70,000? No.
We're saying that the construction of the facility could take 2 years or 3 years. It means that downstream, what is the state of the global economy? What preparation should we do at this present time? But honestly, I don't have all the facts on the project in terms of the financing agreements. I don't have it. But maybe it's a good thing that we do the research and ask for the information and come to this discussion.
With absolutely.
Facts. You also
because it is in the national interest and it is topical. And that's why I asked a very simple question of preparation.
13 years ago, when the Ports Authority embarked on a $70 million project in Melville Street, did you hear anybody saying, why are we doing it? That we couldn't afford it?
People
or
curse.
That this...
People curse.
Some people rant and rave, but all the answers were there.
They say Granite Beach will move.
Yes.
It was put, it was put into the public domain. The EIA data was put into the public domain. The impact on the lagoon, the impact on Granite, all of that was put into the public domain.
But you were chairman and you did a great job.
No,
so we probably needed...
I was working on that, chairman.
I remember seeing you there. But they did say Granite Beach would move and we would have a... So it's always difficult. But no. The thing is to get back with all what's said and how things are received and perceived. Information. So once there's information, that reduces speculation, and then we could move on.
We need facts on this.
Yeah, but Senator needs to leave us.
Yes.
And what else we need to say about this budget? In terms of the capital allocations, Senator Diali, just sit tight for one little minute. In terms of the capital allocations, various talking heads, I was looking at different news pieces last night. various talking heads came out of the budget, you know, saying things about the allocations. But the first time I went to a budget presentation, I was a primary school girl. And I remember Ms. Redhead telling us, I'm a teacher at the time, that when they say education is $140 million, the finance minister says that. But then the next week when the education minister comes, I will hear where the details are. Yeah. So it sounded, you know, like we all at, well, I ain't hear this and I ain't see nothing and that and they in the budget. Can we just put this in perspective? Was Ms. Redhead wrong? Was I wrong all these days of my life?
There's a big book that manages that.
Yeah. The teacher was absolutely correct.
Okay.
An allocation is in fact an allocation. And I remember a former powerhouse, permanent secretary of the Minister of Finance, the great Laurie Wilson Jr. saying, allocation in a budget is not the authority to spend. A budget allocation is not the authority to spend. So that the actual details of expenditure is going to be practically on a case-by-case basis as the situation warrants and as the government will be able to afford.
The allocation gives them authority, but not the real money is available to spend.
Availability is eventually what is going to determine spending.
So when they each come up, I guess we're going to hear more about agriculture.
The details. You would hope so. Because if you look at budget presentations in the past, there have been a way of boasting about what they do or did not do in the constituency, right? And about making marks with their constituents. As a matter of fact, come to think about it. You know, if I know that we would have had election next year, I would have said it's a good election budget, by the way.
Well, the opposition leader said that, Tobias Clement. Yeah, he said it's an election budget. I think I heard Terry Forrester saying it was a pie in the sky
but, you know,
and a wishful thinking.
We have the current party taking the temperature, the people know. So you're not sure where that election will be. You understand? So
again, a pointer for constitutional reform. You must not be surprised about elections. You must know when they're coming. You know, except unlike the big third world country that leads the world now, when people lose, they don't want to go.
Something that raised some eyebrows during the presentation was when the finance minister said that there would be a factory set up for manufacturing cigarettes, and it was people like, but he was quick to point out that it's not for local consumption, it's for export. That was, I mean, unexpected for me.
Right. But a couple of factories, but in terms of employment.
You know, when I saw that part of the budget, I was wondering, but why aren't we growing the tobacco here?
But the argument would be, what's the difference between that and our own factory?
Yes, of course.
What's the difference?
If
you're looking at it from a public health standpoint,
we didn't hear much about the marijuana
and a plant producing herbs and medicine from marijuana. But we got to go. So before we leave, gentlemen, the present day realities, how well does this budget address that?
I'll leave that for Mr. Phillip to answer.
No, I'm asking him directly. I was looking at him.
How the budget addresses present day realities.
How well does it address
the present day realities are characterized by uncertainty. In fact, we started off saying that. And that the only thing certain about going forward was the continued uncertainty that we are going to face for at least the next 6 to 9 months. And notwithstanding, that's why I say to a large extent the budget is a wish list, and that we do have to hope for Santa Claus intervention to ensure that some of the things can be realized. Objectively, I don't know how much wiggle room or leeway the government had. Because in spite of all that is happening out there in the world, they still don't have people throwing money at you. They still have to go out. In fact, and that surprised me, that the government was seeking to reduce external relations by 700,000. Because I believe if we are going to tap into donor sources, whether it is multilateral agencies, whether it is individual countries, I don't know that you could do all of it by Zoom. And even Zoom has a cost.
Yeah.
Zoom has a cost to the extent that I believe the legal system could only afford one Zoom link, therefore holding up the number of cases that a particular judge could drive. So
it impacts productivity too. People get zoomed out.
They get zoomed out.
Senator Deali, this one for you. The National Transformation Fund is a big financier of the plans for the budget. It means it will be, you have to pull in a lot of money.
If I put on my CBI hat, I will say to you that one of the programs that have not been affected in this pandemic is CBI. When in the crisis, the education services was the pinnacle and that didn't get affected. In this pandemic, CBI applications, as a matter of fact, we just did a roundtable a month ago with Cooperative Bank and stakeholders and CBI and so on. And one of the things coming out of the round table is that the demand for citizenship by investments is so great that there's no competition anymore. Because none of us with programs could meet the demand out there. So that alone says to you that the program has a lot of viability. We now have to find a way to exploit it.
Interesting. I saw the Prime Minister saying that as well last week.
So the unit is going to position itself ensuring that we maintain all our standards that it ought to be. But certainly, one of the biggest players in this market called Henley and Partners, which have been one of the biggest marketing agents of CBI, will tell you that no program right now in the world could satisfy the demand for citizenship by investment.
Interesting.
And it's now more than $2 trillion business worldwide. And Grenada is only 2% of that.
Yeah.
And
again, we cannot wrap our heads around individuals in the world with so much wealth wanting a pass.
My closing comment had to do with implementation, I think one of the focus of the government has to be how we deal with the project cycle management and how we get those skills to the persons in project management and the implementers of the project. I think that's going to be key. That's going to be really crucial. There's some work that started there. I think also the debate, that's going to happen. The details, the devil is in the details. I think because the government would have a responsibility, critical at least, to translate hope so their communication is going to be crucial in terms of, and the delivery. That's my closing comment. Thank you.
My closing? Things I would love to have seen elaborated on in the budget if they're already there. And that is one, the question of more direct support in agriculture. The question of the satellite farms I've been telling you about, establishing a couple of them and ensuring that we operate on scientific and business principles.
Right. Good one.
Secondly, the question of expansion of education. I did an article on this, I think it was in The Voice a couple of months back. Education, particularly in terms of two programs where I believe we have export and employment opportunities. The question of training in the maritime administration, something was done the other day for fishermen.
So well said there.
Maritime training, particularly also to serve the yachting industry. Nursing training, because I have spent almost 8 of the last 24 months in Trinidad looking for seeking medical attention. And I was amazed at the number of Pakistani, Indonesian, and foreign nurses that were operating in Trinidad. I was amazed at it. So I believe that there is tremendous activity there in the nursing school. The program, the elaboration, the allocation that we have for education and so on, I would hope that that kind of thing could be considered there. And thirdly and finally for now is the question of drone technology. This thing about people sneaking in St. David's Harbor and so on, whether it is through ignorance or otherwise, the police should be able to have drones that can be able to go a couple of miles.
Use of the drones.
Well, we had a debate. We had a debate about this pretty larceny thing the other day.
I won't start you there.
Don't trigger me.
Don't start. Don't start.
We triggered you here, but you will be triggered to come back.
The drone technology in terms of the fending or identifying in our near-shore waters activity, and also for our own health protection in terms of who want to go up in this or that day because they know it and they don't know that the world changed, or pretending that the world ain't changed, and then the next thing you know, you have COVID cases on your hands.
We do have drone technology in working existence, patrolling the coast.
Expanding it.
Expanding it, yes. We do. I agree with that.
Senator Daly, before you leave, the second part of my question on the NTF was what's currently there?
Approximately. In terms of the fund, I can't say off the top of my head, but there is funds available in NTF. I mean, how the funds is used by government is totally at government.
I just want to know what's in there.
But no, I can't tell you the figure off the top of my head.
All right, wonderful. In the millions, or?
Of course.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
All right, thank you so much, gentlemen. Thanks, everyone. Everyone who tuned in this morning, seeing our Facebook is going crazy. Mr. Phillip, it was really nice seeing you. Thank you for stopping by and being as open and honest as per usual. Yeah. Thank you so very much. And those great suggestions as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes. We can't have you retired. You have to continue to serve in some capacity. Oh, goodness.
No, so once the Grace cells continue to function, I'm around.
Senator Daly, thank you so much. I know you have to run off now to take care of who pays you.
Yes.
And Mr. Campbell, thank you so very much. Really appreciate it. Our producers had us waking up early for a second time this week, but it's useful. We look young, right? Thanks, everyone. Nazim Benjamin for your streaming services. Our executive producer here, Richie Oliver, Kishon Thomas, our producer, and of course, to our wonderful camera people and other technical folks, thank you so much. I am Brenda Bettis. Have a great weekend, everyone. We see you again Monday. Yeah, it's Thursday, but the weekend starts on Thursday. See you again Monday on Perspectives. Bye-bye.